Are you ready? Can crush us. It don't really get no better than this the podcast that you're looking for if you're really heavy into wrestling. Hosted by the Mark. Energy that's so amazing. Gotta keep it entertaining. Rep the Can Crusher Nation. Yeah, you know what's going down in the ring. Lights out when you hit a ding ding. Knock 'em out like boom bada bing. Hold it down, you can crown me the king. Got a shout out to the Miz and Duke the Dumpster. We choke slamming everybody, power driving, hit 'em with a face buster. Yeah, this the show you need and it ain't no need for waiting. Mark, hold it down for the Can Crusher Nation. All about wrestling and keep it entertaining. Can Crushers Wrestling Podcast. Time to break 'em, let's go. Yeah. Can Crushers. Yeah. Can Crushers. Let's go.
Hey, this is Baby Doll, your perfect tan. And if you wanted to listen to some wrestling talk, listen to the Can Crushers.
And welcome back to another Can Crusher Spotlight. Man, I am super excited because my BFF, my homeboy, the English professor, is joining me once again. John, let's repeat because our guest is fabulous.
She certainly is. Our guest is, once again, this is part 2 of Heidi Lee Morgan, women's wrestler extraordinaire, been in the ring with a who's who of women's wrestling. And we really only touched the tip of the iceberg in that first interview.
Yeah, kind of just like her deeper. Getting into wrestling.
Yeah, that's, I guess what we English majors call a metaphor, what you just did there.
Okay.
Yeah.
I hate you.
No, but we definitely want to go a little deeper into some of her feuds, right? Because the response to the first interview was great. It seems like the listeners really enjoyed it, and they reached out to you and asked for more.
Yeah, they did, and they want to know, hey, when are we going to hear about the Wendi? When are we going to hear about Medusa / Alundra Blaze? When are we going to hear about some of the tag team stuff? And I had to put them like, hold on, we have something scheduled. So this one, in hopes, I think it's going to be her whole feud with Wendi Richter, which I think, John, was about, 2 years, 3 years? It could still be going on, right?
It might still be going on. Yeah, maybe, they still haven't settled things because there is some bitterness there, some deep hatred.
Bad blood. Taylor Swift would probably say bad blood.
Probably, yeah. That's what she would say.
I had to get it in one time. So we have Heidi waiting on the line. So do you want to do this stuff real quick?
Let's do it, yeah.
All right. Guys, hats, hoodies, tees, all the cool stuff at Al Snow's Collar and Elbow. Make sure you check it out. John, how much you save?
You save 10% when you use our promo code Can Crushers. That's capital C in Can, capital C in Crushers.
Check out our Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and you can also email us where?
cancrusher69@gmail.com.
There you go. Guys,
I remembered.
I know you remembered. Guys, I will pause right here for a minute. It is May. It's Mental Health Awareness Month. You heard on the weekend shows how much we dive into this. I want to give out the number once again. It's 988 if you're having any thoughts or anything. You can text or call, and somebody is there on the line. Remember, you are enough. John, you ready for Al?
Let's do it. I am ready to hear from Al.
Wrestling. A love and a passion we all share. I've started a wrestling brand. The wrestling brand. A brand founded on the aspects of wrestling. Two entities working together to create a product that connect emotionally for people everywhere. Collar and Elbow is the brand. Passion and love for wrestling is the drive. I am Al Snow, and this is Collar and Elbow, the wrestling brand.
Well, let me tell you, brother, Ravishing Randy Hogan here, NWA WCW star, and I'm coming at you from the Can Crushers, baby. Mark and John, #1 podcast in the whole world, brother. Let me tell you, old school stories, not the same info, not the same questions, coming at you on a regular basis. And what you gonna do when Can Crushers and Randomania run wild on you, brother?
Welcome back to Can Crushers. We just heard from Al Snow over at Collar and Elbow. And we have with us once again on the Can Crushers Spotlight, Heidi Lee Morgan. We touched on a number of things last time, but we wanted to dig a little deeper. Heidi, welcome to the show once again. Thanks so much for joining us a second time.
I am very humbled, John and Mark, that you guys invited me on Can Crushers for a second time. And I'm actually very excited that we're going to be able to talk about one of my incredible feuds I had with my arch nemesis.
And I love this. This is what people were asking for. They wanted to know. We got some emails in. We got a lot of love, Heidi, for you coming on the show and just telling us how you got into wrestling and all that story. But the meat and the potatoes of the emails were, wait, you guys didn't touch on Wendi, Alundra, other gals that you wrestled with. And I just told them all, I'm like, you're going to have to wait and see because we got Wendi back. We got Heidi back. So, yeah.
Yeah, I look forward to sharing some of the highlights with the feud I had with Wendi Richter and some of the behind scenes that people are not aware of. That I'd be willing to share with our audience tonight.
Nice.
Awesome.
Nice.
Because we have some behind the scenes type questions, don't we, Mark?
You do. You know how I'm fly by the seat of the pants, so yeah.
Right. Well, shoot away, Johnny
All
boy.
Right.
Oh wow, we're on nicknames now.
We're both New York, New Jersey, Italian, right?
Now,
Heidi?
wait a minute. Yes, but I have to clarify this. I am in South Jersey, where we have been protesting for eons to be the 51st state, because there is such a difference from North Jersey and us Southern Jersey people. Although the females still have the same attitude. Once a Jersey girl, always a Jersey girl, no matter what part of the state you live.
Absolutely. All right. Take us through how you and Wendi found yourselves in NWF and kind of what kicked off that feud. Because Wendi had been working for Vince McMahon, and the story goes that you had been discovered by Vince McMahon as a bodybuilder. So how do you both find yourselves in the NWF, and why don't you like each other?
Okay. So Wendi, I'm not going to rain on Wendi's parade because that's her story, and maybe I can have her on my show one of these times as well as you guys. But Wendi, I did not have the luxury of meeting Wendi Richter or Sherry Martel or even Luna, because the three of them had left prior to me arriving at Moolah School. So I came to Moolah School in June of 1986. Wendi was gone by that January because there was a terrible blow up, and that will be her story to tell about Moolah and what went on. But there was no love lost there. I will say that. So you fast forward, I come home from Moolah School. You guys already know that. Our audience already knows that. Johnny Rods was helping, because sometimes polishing takes more than 6 months or a year. It could be a couple of years. But I was full-time, so I had a lot of good teachers along the pathway after I came home from Moolah School. So I was working with Johnny Rods and a couple of the New York promotions. Mark Tendler, I forget the promotion he was with in New York. Forgive me on that, but I only did 2 shows. That show opened up an opportunity for me to become crossing paths with George Napolitano, who was one of the renowned photographers back then, Bill Apner, and Carmen Despirito. And I have to put their names out there because of these gentlemen. Us women got a lot of magazine time. We did not have internet access at that point in time. So from me doing that, we found out about a local promotion, which really wasn't local. They were one of the icons, NWF, National Wrestling Federation. They were like one of the top independent promotions around. And they had, when I tell you, they had a slew of names that were just coming out of WWE, and they were WWF at the time. So just the year prior, in 2 years prior, in 1985, WrestleMania pops, Cyndi Lauper, Alpha and Sika Samoan are big highlighter names. You have all these, the Iron Sheik, and the list goes on, that WWE was using. And then between 85 and 86, things, people were being let go, the supply and demand. And these guys came right hot off of WWE being exploded nationally. They became household names, because up to that point, unless you were a wrestling fan, nobody knew who you were. Wendi Richter had a falling out with WWE. And so now NWA, National Wrestling Federation, had Mike Dano, Nate, I forget Nate's last name, Rob Russin, God rest his soul, he just passed away, and Don Drake, DC Drake. Now, the other three gentlemen I just mentioned, Rob Russin, Nate, and Mike Dana, were very, very big promoters and talent agents for big bands. And somehow they came across DC Drake, Don Drake, and they collaborated. And next thing you know, they were on fire. So for an independent show, if you could get on with them, that was your next big stepping stone on the independent circuit to get to AWA. Then if you got to NWF, you got to AWA. Then from AWA to WCW, which was NWA at the time before Turner brought them out. And then from NWA/WCW to WWE, which was the Mercedes, or what's the other car?
Cadillac,
right, of the industry. So from that magazine article that I was in from there was a bodybuilding picture on one of the shows I was wrestling. The feud was going to be between me and Elektra. And that came out in February of 1987. Well, the NWF was paying attention to this stuff, and they saw that, and they're like, wait, she's the local girl? Who is this girl? Like, they didn't know who I was. And all of a sudden they're like, well, wait, they were based out of Camden, New Jersey. So being based out of Camden, New Jersey, they're like, wait a minute, she's also from Moolah School. So we might be able to have a feud because Wendy's from Moolah School. So they got in contact with the magazine. The magazine gave them my number because, of course, you want to give your number to everybody. And then they contacted me, and I went up in person and I spoke with Mike, Nate, Rob, and DC Drake. And then they found out I was second generation, and they told me, X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, I'm in. I am in like Flint. I never met Wendi, but she comes from Moolah School just like I do, and I'm the new generation, and I'm going to show her a thing or two. And they're like, okay, well, next thing you know, they're like, we've got you booked for the first steel cage match in the United States. I'm like, what? What? I signed the contract with them. They guaranteed me so many shots a month. And X, Y, and Z. And I knew that I was going to do a television taping for them in April. And at the time, Damian Kane was a big manager. He managed DC Drake. I can't leave anybody out. He was always a gentleman to me, and he was good on the microphone, which I had not mastered yet. I was like, that's right. You watch some of my interviews. I look so dorkish, but it was hysterical. But I came off, I was a heel. I was a bad guy. If you want to work, you got to go with the role. And I get there, I do my cuts or promo cuts, and Damien helped walk me through it and was very good because I was terrible initially, but because of his talent, I learned how to get better on the microphone through that time period that he was there when I was there. And next thing I know, they come back and they're like, you guys are going to have a steel cage match. And I'm like, what? Like, this is our first time even wrestling each other. And they're like, nope, no, everything goes. And I was in, she was in, and it was just my very first time ever working her. And it was April in Tom's River at the ocean. Now, I can't remember 9 out of 10 of my matches, okay, or where they even were. But that was a pivotal time of my career. And I couldn't remember where the shows were. I knew they were in Brooklyn for Mark Tendler. I can't tell you what schools they were at. I forget. I do remember it, Electra and I were trying to build a feud because she was also at Moolah's school. She was only there for a month, and she's from Staten Island, so she came home. So anyhow, the steel cage, we get told we're going to have the first woman's ever steel cage match. My very first time ever stepping in the ring with Wendi. And what I learned was Wendi was 5'10". I am 5'4" even. If you went by the height of my hair, I was 5'5" because I always fight the crap out of it. Wendi was able to make herself appear my height, which I felt like was an incredible testimony on her talent and ability. And it was like dancing. I mean, we threw punches. She pulled me off of the rope, off of the cage. Dick Worley was our referee. I can go down in history saying I had one of the best referees ever. And Dick Worley did many of mine and Wendi's matches. And that match basically sent a domino effect throughout the industry and opened up many opportunities for us to have a constant feud for a good year and a half. That's the beginning.
That's crazy, because I thought maybe there was some house shows, as I do air quotes, that you guys would do your matches up into this cage match and have that be your big blow off. You did not. I'm not correcting you. Commentary, because I always look at that. That's my nerd spot. Sold that match amazingly. I just watched it probably an hour ago again, just to refresh and everything. Commentary was spot on. I loved it.
Yeah, I think they did an awesome job with it. And it was an intense match. It was really, when you're in, I think back now, I'm 57, right? And all these boo-boos, and I watch these matches, I'm like, well, no wonder I hurt, right? But when you're in the ring, and I was climbing up, there were a couple of spots that I was climbing up the cage. And from the base of the ring, where the floor of the ring that we bumped on, right? From that point to the tippy top of the cage was, what was it, 16 feet. It was 16 feet because it was 2 8-foot sections on top of each other, right? So you have 16 feet up. Now the ring from the floor is basically 3.5 feet. So you have that on top of, right? And I just remember being all the way to the top and my hands holding the top bar. And I just felt this force. And that force, she pulled so hard that I didn't even I felt that like I couldn't hold on any longer. And I took a back bump, like basically 16 feet up in the air before pay-per-view for WWE was even out there, right? And I just remember Dick Worley coming over and he said, "Are you freaking nuts? They don't pay you enough to take a bump like that." But I just, you get just so caught up into the moment that you don't even realize what's going on because the dancing was just flawless. I mean, I look back at the match and see what I could have done better as an amateur. I was a greenhorn, but across the indies and even with AWA and NWA and I mean, we got Gorilla Monsoon reached out to my dad and said that was a hell of a match. That was a main event match because they all got it. They all saw it, and it just to be part of, again, women's history in that realm. And NWF was a very strong, powerful, independent wrestling promotion. And they were just phenomenal to work with. I received many opportunities working with that company, and I'm extremely grateful for it. Absolutely. But that's not where the feud stops. That's where it started.
Right, and that's crazy part. Go ahead, John.
Not to take anything away from anybody else's bumps, but to your point, Heidi, they weren't like gliding. Like, sometimes you see a slam off the top rope. They glide across the ring. They're flying across the ring. You were ripped down on a couple of those and just blasted off the mat.
Yes, absolutely. You're absolutely correct. I was. And that's why Dick Worley said something, because it wasn't a typical I'm coming off and then I'm hitting my feet and taking a bump. I literally took a bump like Cactus Jack took bumps. And he just thought that was completely crazy. He's like, that is just crazy, because he was used to people landing on their feet and then doing a roll bump. I didn't do that. Me and Cactus Jack took bumps. And whether I deliberately tried it or not, I was just into my role and into entertaining the audience. And I was young. I was 21, 22. So you think you're invincible at that age,
Oh, yeah. We'll tell you stories off air of what we did. So, yeah. No.
Did you feel the weight of what you and Wendi were doing, Heidi? Did you feel the weight of what you ladies were doing, what you had accomplished in that moment?
During the moment, I did not realize the significant. I really didn't realize. Okay, so before that match came out to play, right? My dad, being a first generation, he's like, he built me a ring at the shop. So I was spoiled. I had my own ring so I could take my own bumps. And it was made to the dimension of the room. But it was practical and doable. And he was so mad at me when I signed the contract. And he's like, okay, this is the biggest event ever. Like, you're going against Wendi Richter. You got to have your shit together. Forgive my language. He's like, she's 6 foot. Like, you're this. And I'm like, Dad, I got this. Right. So here I am just going to my bodybuilding gyms, training with my buddies there. My male, Joey DeAngelis was one of my training partners, God rest his soul. He was Miss Universe and Mr. USA and had some really good professional titles. And Joey was a very dear friend of mine. And him and I, like, he trained with me because the other guys couldn't hang with him. And so that's all I was only worried about my strength and working out with the weights. So my dad was all pissed off. He's like, you guys are so serious. She's got to eat you up and spit you out. I'm like, yeah. Like, I'm like, typical snot-nosed 22-year-old. I'm like, I got this. I survived Moolah school. I survived Johnny Rods. This is going to be a walk in the park. So then the day that we got there, and found out that I was going to be doing now my dad created the steel cage match, but that was for Alpha and the Samoans. The Wild Samoans had a steel cage match that night. We weren't supposed to have it. Like, I had no idea we were going to do the steel cage match. When we got there, that's when I found out. And now my dad, like, quietly takes me outside. This is why I told you needed to go. Now you don't even know how to. I said, Dad, like, I had no idea. And he's like, well, I guess you're going to learn the hard way. I said, well, I guess I am. You know? So at the moment, I had no idea the impact that it would make. And it really wasn't until, I would have to say, when I got to WWE, they were still WWF in '93 for the women's championship match for Monday Night Raw. That's when I realized the significance of the importance of what Wendi and I did. I didn't realize, still being in the industry and just working my way up, and even working with LPWA, it started to come to a head when I worked with them, but it's still, the realization still wasn't there. And it became evident at WrestleMania 10 when I was there signing autographs, when Moolah and I were talking. And she says, you have no idea what you've done for this industry. And I really didn't realize, because I wasn't crowned their champion. So I didn't think I was ever looked at that way until years later, and growing up and being out of the industry, did I realize the impact it had in the industry. And I'm grateful, though, for that.
You should be. You should be. Did you, walking into this, the cage, because again, the commentators are like, this cage could fall at any minute. Listen, it's a different era. All right. The cage looked a little rickety. Were there concerns, or what?
Yes, there were concerns, because as I was climbing up, you could feel it shake. I'm like, this ain't good. Yeah, there were concerns. But the difference between me wrestling at the age of 22 and then after I had my daughter, I never had, and that's where gymnastics always was never an issue for me, because I never had fear of getting hurt. When I would be on the balance beam at 10, 11 years old and try to do a back handspring, and I would miss the placement of my hands on the beam and come down on my collarbone, I would laugh like a moron, like, and get back up and do it again. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I had no fear. So at 22, I didn't have any fear. You just did it. I just did it. I went with it, thought nothing of it. It wasn't until after I had my daughter that, even though I was trying to get, that's why I worked with Pafa, because Pafa was with WWE at the time, and they were trying to get me polished back to go back to them. And all I kept on thinking about my daughter. If I get hurt, and sure then crap, I got hurt. You know, I broke my back in a match, and that ended it, because the fear, that's when I knew I'm done taking bumps. Like, I was more worried about who was going to take care of my daughter. And if I do something wrong in the ring, I'm screwed. So fear can hurt you in that industry, in the wrestling industry. And at that time, I had absolutely no fear, which is why I was able to do half of the crazy maneuvers I was able to do. And I wasn't scared of against who I was going to work, because I'm like, well, if I get a broken bone, I'll heal. Like, I will be back. So at that point, that's not where my mind wasn't, well, who's going to take care of me? Who's going to take care of my child? At that point, I was just like, I'm resilient. I can do this. I can bounce back from anything. So I didn't have that fear.
My mother called that young and dumb.
Exactly.
As
And
I
your
point to
mother is
myself.
100% correct. Absolutely.
Go ahead, John.
So the match had a little bit of everything. It was a lot of fun. Why did we not see the cage used as a weapon so much? Why didn't we get like Dusty and Flair smashing each other's faces against the cage?
I think
Are you told like ladies don't do that, or what was the
no,
reason for that?
no, that wasn't actually told at all. They said everything goes. And I just think it was because it was the first time that Wendi and I actually worked against each other. That although she knew I came from Moolah school, I was still a Green Hornet. So she really didn't know what I could do. And I don't think she, her having her first opportunity in a steel cage match too. We were like, it was a new area. It's like, a kid at Christmas time getting a toy and not knowing actually how to navigate. Like if you get a Game Boy or a PlayStation, right? I don't know what the games are out there anymore, but I'm hypothesizing there's still Nintendo and Game Boy, right?
Yep,
So if
all
you
of
get
that.
yeah. So if there's a new Game Boy, it's the same thing. Like we're in a new toy. We're in this cage that neither one of us have ever experienced before. And everything goes, but we didn't know, well, what's everything? So she gave me a lot of face smashes to the mat. I gave her a lot. We did the turnbuckle because it was unfamiliar ground. And we tried the best we could, like throwing each other into the ropes, hitting the cage. But we weren't sure what boundaries we were able to do. So I think that if any of the women coming into the industry from that point took that as an educational tool, right? Because I'm a teacher, so I'm going to throw this in there and watch that and say, okay, now you flash forward 30 years later, what could Heidi and Wendi have done? There you go. They could have smashed the faces more on the cage. They could have done this. They could have done that. Whereas our generation was, get up and over. You know what I mean? So we weren't sure we didn't know the comfort zone, what we could do, what we couldn't do. We were just told to go in there and brawl. And that's what we did.
And again, this is match one of everything kicking off, which is amazing.
Yes.
So the crowd was hot the whole night. Did you guys feel that as well?
Oh God, my adrenaline I never did drugs. So I'm only hypothesizing. I've gotten drunk a couple of times. So I guess that is a drug, right? But I've never done the other drugs, right? Because of heart issues, and I stayed away from that stuff. So I can only hypothesize the adrenaline, because I'm an adrenaline junkie anyhow, because I live for
Clearly.
I live for thrills, right? So the adrenaline high that I have felt, because we went on, I guess it was like around 8:30 at that night. I think I was wired up to like 7 the next morning. I just couldn't sleep. I was just so wired up because I'm like, oh my God. Because then my brain's going, oh, the possibilities. I could have done this. I could have done that. And that's for me. I always looked for what could I do better. And that was the one thing I always, I never saw myself as like, well, that match was okay. You know what I mean? Like any of the women, like even when I worked at LPWA and we would come back from the tag matches and everybody's like, oh my God, you got 40 girls in the back room. That was phenomenal. I'm like, oh yeah, but we could have done this differently. Like I was never satisfied with how I reacted to something, not the other person. And that's what my opponents will tell you. I never complained about what they did. It was, I could have done this and it could have been smoother. And they all looked at me like, are you nuts? But that's what I think made me a good worker, was I always wanted to be on top of my game.
Yeah, that's a great point. After this happened, okay, I know you just had the adrenaline and everything, and John kind of, went back and forth about it. Did you and Wendi go back and say, holy shit? I'll throw the words out there, holy shit, look what we just did.
Yeah, we absolutely did. And Wendi said, how long have you been at Moolah School? I said, 6 months. She says, no. And I said, yeah, but she says, well, I train there, 5 days a week too. she's like, well, she says, you got my respect. She says, but they don't pay you enough to take those type of bumps. She's like, just incredible, just purely incredible. And I always, I mean, our feud was really good, but I would always be willing to ask, what could I do? Because she was the veteran. Like, she allowed me to experiment with maneuvers in the ring that, other people would have never have allowed me to do, like a Judy and Leilani might have. But a lot of the girls on the independent circuit didn't have that maturity and knowledge and skill within themselves to allow a Green Hornet to come in and try these different crazy maneuvers. But because Wendi was experienced with Moolah and going to Japan and familiar with that style of wrestling, she's like, sure, try it. And if all you can do is get screwed up, you screw up, I'm throwing you off. Like I ain't taking a bump. You know what I mean? So, yeah. And listen, she potatoed me many times. You have to potato people. You don't have a choice. When you're right there in front of the crowd, you can't hold back on a punch or a chop. You can't do that. So trust me, I earned some scars from that woman.
Nice.
Yeah, but our adrenaline was just incredible. And it was just like, we couldn't wait to watch the video. We just wanted to see how it came out.
So you're in the back, and you mentioned Wendy's asking how long have you worked with Moolah. So you've obviously got great respect for Moolah. It sounds like Wendi still has some respect, at least for what Moolah's done for the industry. Are you picking up on? Let's see if we can get you to dish here, Heidi. Are you picking up on any? Is there still heat between them at all? This is about a year or two after the whole.
Oh, there was serious heat.
Yeah.
There was serious heat. Serious heat. Oh yeah. Like, that's Wendy's story to tell, but Wendi, and she pulls no punches about it, or didn't back then. Like when I tell you Wendi point blank, like after she found, like she knew I came from Moolah's school. She said, I have never hated anybody as much as I hate that woman there. And I will see her in hell. And I mean, she meant it. She meant it. She later, as I grew to know her, I learned the story, and that's her story to tell. It's not mine, just like any woman I interview on my shows, or even the women wrestlers I've worked with. What we've done in the ring, or my experience, on a funny note, I will share. But what they shared verbally with me is definitely their story. But what I will share is there was no love lost. Now, Moolah never talked crap to me about Wendi. She just said, keep yourself grounded and don't let the boys run your life in this industry. But she never said anything negative about Wendi. But Wendi, like I said, Wendi had shared that with me. And then as I worked with her for that year and a half, riding her coattail, and she felt more comfortable, she shared. And, being an outsider listening and looking in, I can understand why she felt that way. Of course, I would always be like, now you got to let it go if you want your blessings.
Right. One quick follow-up, Mark, if I may.
So, yeah.
Did she have any advice for you? Like, hey, this could happen to you if you go to work in New York. Just watch yourself.
Yep, absolutely. She said, don't turn your back. Don't trust them. They'll make you feel like $1 million and the next day screw you over.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of deep hurt, I mean, and you got to understand, when she was crowned the champion, she was only, I believe, 21, 22 years of age. She was like one of the first pretty female wrestlers during that time, which, I'm not picking on the women in the industry, but Wendi did not look like a typical female wrestler. You know what I mean? So, that was a positive for her, but a negative. But Wendi could work. Wendi wasn't like some of the women that got in the industry because they were dating the wrestlers and they had a cute body and a cute face and had no clue how to wrestle. You know what I mean? Wendi could work. Wendi came from the best school. So what had transpired for her, it was wrong. I mean, I'm sorry. It was wrong how they did it. I just think there's other ways that it could have been handled professionally.
So you got this year and a half feud with Wendi. We've essentially beaten the first match. So let's find out more as you guys travel together. In a Mark question, because that's just what I am. Hounds that you really appreciated as you were going along, because you named the Slaughter and the Samoans and Wendi and Misty and Damien. I saw all those people at NWF in Clearfield, Pennsylvania. I popped. This was the biggest thing ever to come, and it's like an hour away. So I was so happy that NWF came. Was there a city or two that you're like, this is a great place?
Absolutely. So Delaware State Fair, Harrington State Fair was one of my favorite places of all times to put on a wrestling show. And NWF had a good lock-in with the county fairs and state fairs. They had connections, and no one could top them on that connection. And we were very fortunate. And I'm telling you, those fairgrounds, those stadiums at the fairgrounds that held 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 people were packed, standing room only. And rightfully so, because they had Slaughter. They had, all these big names, the Iron Sheik. You had Slaughter against the Iron Sheik. You had this Wild Samoans against Tommy Richard, the Fantastics. Then you had some independent wrestlers, Tom Brandy and Mike Kalua, and of course DC Drake, whoever his feud was going on with. And so it was just really incredible to be part of some hype. And I mean, Dick Worley there was always two referees. One was Dick Worley, and then whoever else, NWF, and I don't say that disrespectfully. I just know, what's his name? Billy Silverman.
Yes. Billy Silverman,
phenomenal. Yes. And then he worked with Savotes afterwards as well. But Billy would take care of the guys' matches, and I forget the other guy's name. Oh God, I'm so sorry that I forget who it was. There was someone else. Anyhow, we always had Dick Worley. Dick Worley always did the girls' match. Nobody else. There was one time Dick Worley couldn't make it, and I forget the gentleman's name, but dark hair. I can see him as clear as day. He did like 3 fairs with us. But basically, I worked 12 days a month with NWF. So it would be either Thursday, Friday, or Saturday, or it would be Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And they kept me busy that whole time for a good year. It was like a year and a half. And then opportunities, they started, falling, I don't want to say falling apart, but their time had run. And then other doors opened up on the independent circuit that I had the opportunity. But yeah, we had a good year and a half. We did Fort Dix. We did a lot of forts with the military. NWF had a contact there. And that was really cool because they were mobs. I mean, you're looking at 8,000 people.
Wow.
It was just like incredible. I mean, back then, and that it was just the time frame. And for them to be an independent to do that was just like incredible. That's why they were able to afford the names that came in. Because of the size of people that came to those shows. But yeah, we had some, there were a couple of times that they were building the angle for me and Wendi, that they had other girls like Babyface Nelly came in. This is when I started meet Katie Kincaid. This is when I started wrestling other women that were not ever affiliated with Moolah. And that's how I started meeting the girls on the independent circuit and learning who they were.
So what's that like when you're working with someone who comes from a different school? Can you tell as soon as you put your hands on that woman, like this is different?
Absolutely. And I think that was the one good thing that, Johnny Rod's going to him was very good at going to, because the girls back in my generation, the women worked off of one side and the guys worked off of the other. So if you were trained by a man primarily, right, in quotes. So when I went to Johnny Rod's, when Electra and I went to Johnny Rod's and we were sparring with him, we learned the other side. So it made it easier, but I was also open-minded, but you could tell. You could tell there was a difference, like combinations. Moolah's school was very, very good with combinations, the holds and going from one to another and the smoothness. And a lot of them really didn't have that. I mean, they knew how to do spots, but they really didn't know how to do maneuvers. And I was taught a lot of maneuvers. So that was one thing I found with some of the independent. Now, that's not saying all the women. That's just saying a select few because of who trained them. Walter Kowalski, when I did work with Misty and them, her as my partner, he was big on maneuvers. So Misty and them were very good at combinations like I was, because that was what Walter Kowalski, he's old school. That's what they knew. They weren't into the high spots. They were into combinations. You know what I mean? But some of the newer, like, what's his, he used to have a school down here. He passed away. Bam Bam Bigelow came from his school. I just went brain dead. I know you know.
I'm thinking of it right now. Yeah.
But he had a school. Why can't I remember it? Oh my God.
I'm going to look it up. Go ahead.
Yeah. But it's the school that Bam Bam went to. And I mean, all they were was high spots. They didn't do maneuvers, and I'm not picking on them, but that's all they did back then. It was just like, because, the spots. Well, what about combinations? So some of the females that came from there that I did on the independent circuit, they had no idea. They're like, well, I know an arm bar. And I'm like, okay, how about a hammer lock? How about a top wrist lock? How about going from this to that? So it was pretty interesting. And again, I'm open-minded, and you just roll with what they're able to do. And then hopefully you can rub off on them on, well, here, this is how you do this into this or whatever,
Larry Sharp.
Larry Sharp. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Larry Sharp's school. And I'm not picking on him. I mean, Bam Bam got very phenomenal going over to Japan, because Japan, even though they do a lot of spots, they're combinations. If you watch their matches, they'll roll you up like a boa constrictor. You know what I mean? It's just really phenomenal to watch some of those moves.
So how do you come off, to get back to you and Wendy's feud now, how do you come off of the cage match to you're going to go to like singles matches or whatever? Right. How does all that play out now over the next while?
Okay, so now that was in April, and then that aired around June, I believe.
36 years, June 20th. I got it written down. Yep.
Yeah, thank you. I didn't lose too much. So it aired June 20th, but it was actually in April that we had the match. And from that point, they had already had lined up I had signed the contract with them. The contract I signed was a minimum of 6 matches a month, but we winded up like blowing that summer up with like three times a week minimum. And we did not travel together. She flew in, she drove, she had her Padres she drove with, and I always basically drove with DC Drake. Or if I wasn't meeting them at at the headquarters in Camden, because we would travel in the van. They had a van, and I was like their kid, so I would travel with the promoters. I mean, seriously, I did. I was like one of their kids. And so sometimes, because my traveling was part of it, they're like, okay, you're going to drive with us, kid. And I would meet in Camden because, we would be wherever and then come back. That way I didn't have to drive by myself. So some I did drive by myself, some I didn't. But I never traveled with her. I just met her there. And what it was the feud was coming off of the cage match, and then we worked the angles, and then Damian Kane would always come out, and basically my matches I would screw myself. Sometimes, because I would think, like, I would do a Buddy Rogers approach, like, ha ha ha, I outsmarted you, and then boom, she gets me. So, I make myself look bad. So it wasn't where it was a squash match. It was literally where I screwed myself. And that is attributed to, that's how she wanted the storyline to go. She says, because if we're going to roll this out over time period, then you can't have it where it's a squash or a clean win. She says it literally has to be where she's constantly screwing herself. And if you watch quite a few of the matches, that's how it came out, where I thought that I had it licked in a bag, and then boom, she outwits me at the last second, which kept it going to the next one, and then to the next one, and to the next one. And then Dick Worley bringing in, you never knew with him. It changed every time in the match. He would be pointing at me, screaming at me, and
Nice.
doing all this stuff. And he's like, and it just, like, his talent was so incredible. And his storyline on how, if he saw that me being still a little green would get like a little lost, and instead of Wendi and I talking in the match, because she didn't like that stuff, he would wind up come over at like this and saying, get your head back in here, shake it off, you screwed up, it's okay, but this is what you're going. And no one had a clue. No one had a clue. Her and I never talked. We never talked. Never talked. It was the communication of him would relay it. And that is incredible talent. I mean, honestly, Judy Leilani, Sue Green, Sue Sexton, and Bull Nakano were all like that. I didn't have to say a word. They didn't have to say a word. It just was. And that's incredible to be able to wrestle like that.
That laundry list, by the way, that she just said is phenomenal. Just to say, I worked all right with them. Oh my God. Go ahead.
John. They were phenomenal to work with. You never heard a word come out of their mouth. It just was. And you just knew. It wasn't like second guessing. You knew that even if you were getting the shit beat out of you by them, that it was going to be perfect. If that makes any sense.
Perfect sense.
Yeah. So that's how we kept on building the storylines up.
And to that point of, continuing the storyline and keeping it going, you kicked it off with a cage match, which typically has, a sense of finality. But even the way she won, she dove out, and you're still there talking trash, and she's talking trash. And then you guys brawl again afterwards. Mm-hmm. And even though she kind of beats your ass in that brawl and drops you on the floor, there's this sense that if this lady gets back up, it's on again.
Exactly. She says, you're a flea. You were like a flea. You don't want to die. That's what she called me. She said, you're just like a flea. You didn't want to die.
what are some great memories besides watching the matches that we can go back and watch all the matches. They're out there somewhere. But what are some great memories of you and Wendi, not on the road together, but that you just shared because of this? Yeah.
Okay, so one of my favorite matches happened to be, there were a couple actually with her. But one was at Fort Dix. And again, we had, oh my God, if it wasn't 5,000 to 8,000 people, I don't even know what it was. And all around the ring, they didn't even sit. They were all standing. And then you had the bleachers. And I just remember, like, she was obviously the crowd favorite, but it was so cool to be able to go in, like, your adrenaline when they introduce your name, and I can understand how an entertainer that's an incredible singer or comedian, when they introduce your name and you hear people either boo or yeah you, there's this incredible adrenaline that you get. The endorphins are just released. And I just remember they started playing my ZZ Top song, She's Got Legs. Because obviously I always come out first because I'm the heel, and playing around with the crowd and Dick Worley, and we're fighting back and forth, Dick and I. He's going over the rules and like, oh my God, kid, this crowd's incredible. You can have them eating out of your hand if you do the right thing and don't screw this up, right? And I'm like, yeah, and I'm gonna pull your, and so we're playing back and forth, not even arguing, but talking about how incredible this experience is. But if you're watching our arms, it looks like we're fighting with each other. Now, Wendi is introduced, and girls just want to have fun coming on, and she's bebopping as Wendi does. And then I'm, getting up like this Napoleon attitude, jumping up on the turnbuckle, kissing my biceps and looking like, what, you're worshiping her? And as soon as she would get in the ring, I just remember just diving on her. And I just remember when we were talking about, she's like, now I'm going to get in the ring. When I get in the ring and turn my back, then come get, that just totally went out the door. As soon as she got in that ring, and we started rolling. She said, what the hell, girl? And it was just so magnetic. And that's actually one of the first times that the audience ever, and I really wish that would have been on video, but she goes out of the ring because I throw her out of the ring. And I remember climbing up, and it was like the first time they saw me do like something really crazy. And she looked up, and it wasn't even planned. I just jumped right out. And she looked, and I remember her jaw. Like, she's like, holy, like, I can't finish the statement, but her jaw like dropped to the ground and like looked at me like this, like, are you kidding me? And I perfectly across her, and we bumped, and she says, they don't pay us enough for this. And it just, I'm telling you, it was one of the best highs outside of the steel cage match. I just did it. I just went with it. It wasn't planned. It just was perfect. The crowd was behind her. I was doing my job because they hated me. They loved to hate me. And it just was dynamic. And I really wish that match would have been videotaped. I really do.
John, let me come. I know you have a question. How many times, and I say this out of love, were you called a lunatic for doing everything you did? And, I mean,
oh God,
you
Wendi
did stuff
herself,
way before.
Yeah, Wendi herself, I think at least twice out of the 3 days. So, what's that? 12, do the math, guy. Like 10 out of 12 times she would say, they're not paying you enough. They are not paying you enough. I'm like, well, you caught me. She's like, don't think I'm going to do it next time. I'm just going to move. She never did. She always caught me. She could have moved to make a point.
Right.
Did you ever get one over on her? I know she was champ, so you probably didn't pin her, but did you get any count-out victories over that you can remember? DQs?
Well, there were actually, no DQs, but there were a couple of times that I was wrongfully beaten where I was, and then like 6 to 9 count. And then I threw my hands up like, what's wrong with you, ref? Of course he was conveniently knocked out or dazed or whatever. But there were many times during that run over the summer to build up for other TV shows or tapings that you could tell that, yes, he was willing to allow me that grace on showing that, yeah, I beat her, but I didn't beat her, because the tides were against me, basically, which made me angrier as a bad guy.
But that's Wendi being a pro too and understanding the art of storytelling and selling tickets for next time.
Absolutely. And that's where I think sometimes some people lose that perspective in the industry. If you don't have a good story, like, listen, in order for somebody to be a champion, someone has to make them look good, right?
Yep.
And in order to be a good wrestler, you have to be willing to learn everything, like the psychology, the ins and the outs, and then understanding. It can't be a clear victory every time. Then why would there be a feud, right? So if you allow that opportunity, you could be wrestling that same person for years, like The Undertaker. The Undertaker had some incredible matches thousands of time with Mick Foley. And was it Mick Foley?
Yep.
Mick Foley, because of how their matches were. And they were two that I always enjoyed watching because they understood their place in the industry and they understood what it was about, And I think sometimes some people, their egos get in their way and they forget it. They just forget,
You mentioned earlier the tide maybe started to turn a little bit for the NWF. Did you and Wendi settle this? Did this get its proper send off? Was there one final match where the good guy finally wins? Or did things kind of go south before you really got to that point?
No, we didn't get to that point, which was sad. And years go by, right? And we get the opportunity to do autograph signings. And, I come across her, and that was the first time I had seen Wendi in years. And it was a nice homecoming. Alundra Blaze was there as well as Medusa. No, as Alundra. No, she was there as a Medusa, not as Alundra. And there were a couple other young ladies there that I didn't really work with, but they were in the industry the same time that I was. They were just different avenues or came in after me or whatnot. But it was really nice, and that's what Wendi got to meet my daughter, and at the time my husband, and she reminisced with my daughter the feuds, and she's like, "And we never got to finish." I said, "No, we didn't." She says, "Well, hell, I'm too old." I said, "So am I."
I was just gonna get the one more match chant going.
Yeah. Oh, hell no. Yeah. No, you couldn't pay me enough to take a bump.
We talked to Medusa, Mark, and she talked about her and Bull Nakano maybe one more time. And I thought that's where Heidi was going with this.
I did.
We were going to get her and Wendi one more time, but now they're both tapped out, I guess.
Yeah. I'm sorry, guys. I don't mean to disappoint, but I want to be remembered that I could jump off of the rope. She didn't jump off the top rope. I don't want that. Remember me for what I could do, not what I can't do.
Pulling the wall, the curtain, or whatever down. How often do you get to, chat with Wendi, or do you guys, touch base once a month or something? Because
Alundra and I do talk once a month. I'm friends with some of my other nemesises now on Facebook, like Peggy Lee. Bambi and I were partners for PAL. Misty is not on Facebook. Her husband is, so he's my friend. But Wendi is, and I won't give her private name. She's under a different name, her private name. But her and I do conversate, but not like Deborah, Medusa and I do. So I talk to Medusa and Judy and Peggy more often, and Velvet. They're the ones I do talk to more often on Facebook. But Deborah is a phone call as well, which is Medusa. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. So that's what did we miss? Because I know keeping you a little long. What did we miss? And then again, we want to know what's going on with your radio show and all of that. Because can we ruin it one more time? We're gonna have a Medusa show, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Because that's a whole nother entity.
It really is. It really is. And you kind of got screwed from the WWF. So we'll leave it at that for there.
Yes, absolutely.
But yeah, what else is going on in your life since the last time we talked to you? How's the radio show and all that?
My radio show is going very well. I've just completed 39 weeks. Planet Fitness is still my sponsor. Thank God for that. I have my lineup for 8 more weeks. So I'm grateful that women are still willing to tell their story. I've had some incredible interviews with some of these women that have been, the one that I just did, she's a sign language, phenomenal. She came out of college with her master's in it, and that's when the pandemic happens and they cut the programming. So here, not only is she American Sign Language, but she's Puerto Rican Sign Language, and there's differences with that. So it's learning. I have a physical therapist, Ruth Waterman. She will be on my show this week. And they adopted. So the storyline is the involvement, what it takes to adopt. They have biological children, but they also adopted. So that will be the testimony with that. And I have a college professor coming on. So I have a lot of interesting women. So the talk show is still going strong. I still have, I'm looking to branch out from the radio station to bigger venues. And I've been working with some of our local schools on doing assemblies before I go into because I'm an educator for Planet Fitness. So I've been going into some local preschools on doing moving as a gift. And then we were just reiterating, because I did boot camp tonight. I stay very active. So I did boot camp, and the one woman at the boot camp happened to be the director of the school that I did the program for. And it was 108 little kids. And I said, that was a lot of fun last week. And she says, Heidi, she says, you don't understand. She says, we can't even get 10 little kids to behave in 20 minutes. You had 108 kids. She said, you had 108 kids. And literally saying these big muscle names. She says, we were so impressed that, oh my God, she's not just somebody that throws people around. She's that, because I had these little kids like say pectoral, and they're like pectoral, major. And I'm like pectoral. And then they would say it, or gastro, Nemus, gastro, and then we're pointing. And then I would literally, there were 7 exercises, and I gave out flyers on what they did and how moving is a gift. If you lose it, if you don't use it, you're going to lose it. So don't take it for granted, because something might happen where you can't move. And it really reached 108 little kids. And that's the third one I've done since January, because it's trickling down into the public school system that, hey, this is actually pretty good. And I'm actually able, like, I throw an entertainer twist to it where I get the kids involved. And, if they can scream and they're allowed to scream with you, it just makes all the energy. It's a great time. So this is and my daughter's getting married. So that's just not, she's not getting married this year, but her big engagement is this weekend. So I've been very busy putting that stuff. So that's what I've been up to.
Good. Everything going Heidi, it sounds like, right?
I hope so.
Nice.
With a little bit of grace and mercy.
Godspeed. Yeah, I understand.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Mark and I have each coached little kids, and we've had trouble, Mark, controlling, I would say, 8%
ourselves. We had trouble controlling ourselves first and foremost, but
about 8% of the number that Heidi threw out there.
What did you coach them in?
Mark and I were both baseball coaches. Mark coached soccer as well.
Oh, whew. So do you not find with the soccer, because I ran the sporting program when I was a physical education teacher at St. Francis of Assisi. And we put together, when there was a CYO, which was Catholic Youth Organization, we put together the first soccer team for South Jersey for the Camden Diocese. And we had to have a foundation. So we had a soccer club for the kindergarten and first, second, and third graders. And then there was JV, which was fourth and fifth graders. And then varsity was sixth, seventh, and eighth. Well, the little kids wanted to be what the big kids were. So when we did the soccer club, the one dad was a traveling soccer coach. He's like, I can't deal with this. Like, these kids don't want to learn positions. I'm trying to have my front line, my fullbacks. Everybody wants to just pounce on the ball.
Yes.
It's great.
It's so much fun. What I learned when I was doing it, you have to teach them games first. Hey, we're going to play games. We're going to have a little bit of soccer practice, and then we're going to go back to the game, because they want the game in the game to be the beginning and the end. Whatever they learn in the middle is a stretch, but they're still playing soccer.
Right. And wherever that ball is, they all are at.
If you could see us right now, the whole group of 10 of them are just hovering around the field.
It's hysterical. Yeah. And then baseball, I give you guys credit for that, because who's swinging at the flies, who's sitting pulling dandelions. It's like, oh my God. The only ones interactive is the batter, the catcher, and the pitcher. Everybody else is doing their own little thing.
Yeah.
So
but
you have
fun.
my unconditional appreciation for that, because I understand.
Thank you.
This has been great. I think I'm out of questions, and she's given us more than what she promised, because she's awesome. That's why.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate you letting
agree.
me share.
Guys, we ruined it again. Part 3 is coming up in a while. It's all Alundra. It's going to be so much fun. As I said, she was screwed. So we'll dive into that big time. So, Heidi, again, we'll end this. I love you. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your night, your stories, and everything here with us on Can Crushers.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you, Mark and John. Thank you for allowing me to share my journey in the world of wrestling. And I look forward to talking to you guys again, and I can't wait to share this with my many fans and Facebook family and Instagram family.
So, Mark, how many feuds do you know start with a steel cage match? That's got to be some pretty deep hatred from the word go, where we're going to say, you know what, we're kicking it off with a steel cage match, and let's see where it goes from there.
How about this, John, to put the caveat on top of it? The first ever woman steel cage match. So this is crazy. This is unbelievable. And again, thanks to Heidi for sharing all the stories. But yeah, I didn't know that it started the feud.
I had no idea. I've seen the match. As we discussed, I thought for sure the way they went at it, that was what ended the feud. But apparently that was just the start of things. And I was a little bummed to know that NWF kind of started to take a turn before Heidi and Wendi could really wrap things up, because we saw that Wendi was a masterful storyteller in the ring, as Heidi could attest to. And it seems like they kept this thing going for a while and could have kept it going a little while longer.
I tried getting the one more match chant going, but she shut me down real quick.
Yeah. I even tried to say, like, oh, look what Medusa and Bull Nakano are planning. They, are thinking about one more match, maybe you two, but nah, they said they're done.
Yeah. I'll say this, shame on NWF for not wrapping up the whole story. Like, this needed a bow. It really did.
Yeah, I would agree. I liked the not necessarily the wins, because Heidi said she didn't get a count out, she didn't get a DQ, but there were times where she had Wendi pinned, but the referee was down or not paying attention. Just such good psychology, such good storytelling by two pros. You can't overstate what Heidi meant to women's wrestling. Obviously, in the first interview, we talked about what she did later on, how she kind of resurrected, helped to resurrect at the very least, what was going on in women's wrestling in the WWF. But, a good 8-9 years before that, she was doing some things with Wendi Richter that were obviously just as important as what she would do later on.
Yeah, and what's to do later on is so much. Guys, you heard me ruin it a couple times that part 3 is scheduled, and we're getting set up for that. And it's going to be, I believe, it's going to be her and Medusa as we round into what she does in the WWF. But, John, I want to say one thing that Heidi was talking about when she came out to the ring, how her music, always just gave that little extra pep. And this isn't released. You're going to be one of the first ones to know this, actually, on recording and everything. I've ring announced a few times, and, I've just walked to the ring and just did that. Well, this past weekend, I got to ring announce again, and just to give everybody that true life feel, the promoter's like, hey, hold on a minute, don't go out yet. They legit played the Can Crushers theme song and said you're not allowed going out until 30 seconds into it. John, it hits different when you come through that curtain. It's freaking awesome. I'm getting chills again right now telling you, since you're the first one to know. Like, the family doesn't know until they see the video of it. But now it's on the podcast. Everybody will find out. But it just hit different. I ran around the ring giving people like high fives, kind of like crazy, slow Ultimate Warrior, because I'm not as fast as him.
Right. That's some Razor Ramon type stuff where he was about to hit the curtain and Vince said, no, make him wait. Mark was about to go through the curtain and they were like, no, make the people wait, Mark. I love it. That is giving me chills.
Yeah. But it's not about me. It's about Heidi. Heidi was amazing once again. So much. That list of who's who that she named at the NWF, all in Clearfield. They made one stop in Clearfield one time. And man, I almost wish, John and I always talk about, what if NWA had, maybe better marketing or this or that. Same thing with NWF. What if they just had that extra little couple bucks in their, and we know it's more than a couple bucks, but extra couple bucks in their back pocket or better marketing or something. Maybe we're talking about them still. I love all these thoughts that we come up with.
Yeah. Yeah. If only.
If only we'd win the lottery. All right, let's see if you remember this. Remember, just because you're trash doesn't mean you can't do great things.
It's called a garbage can, not a garbage cannot.